Hello everyone. You're about to hear a brief retelling of the movie Only the Strong. Enjoy. Luis Stevens served in the army in Brazil and was about to return home, but before leaving he decided to join the local Capoeists. The fun ended when his superiors came for the Green Beret and hurried him off back to the U.S. Stevens thanked the Brazilian who taught him the Capoeira, and the latter gave him a marimba musical instrument. Stevens returned to his hometown of Miami. The first thing he wanted to do was visit the school he went to. It is all graffitied and covered with garbage, and in the toilet the schoolboy asked if the men would sell him some dope. No one pays attention to Kerrigan's science teacher, and they raise their hand only to send him away. The teacher has to drink at recess to somehow endure the mayhem going on in the school. Kerrigan greeted a former student. Stevens said he spent 4 years training Brazilians to fight, but now it's time to return to civilian life. In Kerrigan's opinion, nothing good awaits him at the school. The stairwells are barred, and kids either jump themselves or threw someone down for fun. The janitors are tired of scraping them off the floor. Kerrigan hadn't decided whether he was a teacher or a zookeeper, but these weren't children, they were animals. They're not worth saving. 75% of them carry guns, and only 12% graduate high school. Stevens realized he had no business being here and was about to leave, but then he found himself in the middle of a crowd watching a big Jamaican man abuse a kid for refusing to sell drugs here. Stevens demanded that the schoolboy be released. The perpetrator balked, and a gang of Jamaicans surrounded the soldier. The other schoolchildren liked such a showdown. They were sure that the upstart would get a head kick, but the Green Beret, under joyful shouting, piled on all three bandits, using an unusual fighting technique. The Patlati-headed Ambo was knocked out, and Kerrigan concluded that this was the only way to get the attention of the barbarian schoolchildren. At the teacher's council, he suggested teaching the troubled students Brazilian kung fu to channel their energy. But other teachers do not support the idea. Teaching scumbags to beat people is even more effective. However, the guy was supported by a young teacher who was in the same class with him. She says that Stevens was also a troubled teenager, but then Kerrigan helped him to improve. Perhaps he will also be a good mentor for the boys. Stevens thanked Diana and tried to ask her out, but the girl claims that she only liked Stevens' initiative, not him. She also dates the teacher who tried to interfere with Stevens. Together with Kerrigan, they found an abandoned building of the fire station, in which students will now learn capoeira, but first they need to kick out the homeless and wash the urine off the floor. When the cleanup was done, the hooligans were brought in on a school bus. The motley crew is lined up in a row and won't shut up for a second. Each of them already had a case on file. Kerrigan introduced the boys to their instructor and made it clear that the Green Beret would not babysit them like the other teachers. Stevens demanded that Donovan turn up the music and showed the boys the jinga, the swaying motion that always started capoeira. The bullies laughed until Stevens showed them how the basic movements transitioned into spectacular leg kicks. Afterward, he asked to play music recorded in Brazil. Orlando wanted to turn it off and backed up his intention with a folding knife. The acrobat decided to play a hooligan and started jumping all over the building. The scumbag seriously intended to cut the teacher, but after receiving a kick he ended up on the floor. Stevens proved the effectiveness of capoeira and invited the guys to the next class. To make peace with Orlando, he returned the knife to him. Kerrigan told of a cousin, a young man who runs an entire gang. Apparently Stevens doesn't have a house of his own, so he slept in the garage. He's awakened by Donovan's upbeat remix of Brazilian music. That sounds much more upbeat. Stevens' first full class will be outside, but everyone is shy about jingling, even Shay, who was rescued by a man in the schoolyard. Everyone thought they were going to be taught to fight, not dance. Shay got punched in the face by Eddie, and a fight almost broke out between them. The teacher promised the dark-skinned boy that next time he could beat up Eddie. The schoolboy learned something, and now he sends his opponent to the ground time after time. Eddie gave up, and Stevens convinced the rest of the guys in the effectiveness of martial arts. Some of the students also started Jenga dancing. Diana came to watch the class, Today the mentor is familiarizing the students with the musical instruments used in Capoeira. Stevens still hopes to find an approach to Orlando, but he is not going to play on wooden shit and jump like a goat, and the instructor, in his opinion, is just a loser. One evening Stevens found Orlando on the basketball court and asked why he didn't come to class. It's better than working for his brother and stealing cars. Stevens was surrounded on all sides by thugs, and Orlando's cousin Silverio pulled up. He saw how the stranger easily scattered his men on the basketball court. Silverio has already heard about the Capoeira teacher and offers Stevens to teach his men to fight. He'll pay far more than a school teacher can earn. But in return, Stevens sneers at the authority figure. Then Silverio suggests that they find out who the real Capoeira master is. After all, he himself grew up in the slums of Rio de Janeiro. The bandits began to clap and set the rhythm, and after a short fight, the big guy kicked Stevens so hard that he couldn't get up and kicked his lying opponent. Silverio decided that Stevens wasn't good enough to train his men, but he could teach his brother the basics. Just don't fill Orlando's head with nonsense. The authority figure has big plans for him. The battered warrior has returned to his hideout. Diana is there to help him heal his wounds. The blonde was sure Silverio would beat him up, so she was on duty at the gym with a first aid kit. We learned that they weren't just in the same class, they were even dating. The soldier got the lady to show him a handstand, and then he got down next to her. They reminisced about old times and spent the night together. No one has been giggling in class for a while now, and Orlando has joined the students. The boys are making progress and are mastering the unusual martial art with passion. Diana cooled to her lover, a tan muscular demon she likes much more. In front of the principal and teacher, Shay accidentally smashed Orlando's nose, but if before it could lead to a stabbing, now the guys parted peacefully. If it worked for them, it might work for other schools. So the principal suggested that Capoeira be introduced into the curriculum at all schools in the district. Classes are being videotaped, and soon Stevens will have to supervise the instruction of 1,200 students. The man has arranged to take his boys to a sleepover in the country, but the frightened schoolchildren are afraid to get off the bus. Diana would also prefer to spend the night in a hotel. Everyone is still sleeping on the bus, and Stevens is already doing a warm-up on the beach. The guys immediately joined the teacher. The guys had a great time riding along the beach all day, and today they have already agreed to spend the night in tents. Orlando is sitting alone and sad by the water. Today he had to work for his cousin and make money, so he will soon find a replacement and he will be left without a salary, but Stevens convinces the schoolboy that he does not have to spend his life dismantling stolen cars and live in the same neighborhood. The world's a much bigger place with lots of opportunities. Silverio and his men were waiting for the bus at the school. He reprimanded his brother for not showing up for work and punched him in the face. The gangster was going to take the younger one out of school, but Stevens wouldn't let him. The gangster saw Diana and threatened that if the teacher took his brother away, he would take his woman. He threatened to do something terrible if Stevens didn't take his brother away. They almost got into a fight again, but since the altercation took place near the school, the police arrived pretty quickly. Orlando agreed to leave with his brother, but promised to return to school. The bandits decided that instead of killing Stevens, they would set him up. The villains stormed the school grounds, beat up a teacher, slashed the tires of all the cars in the parking lot, and trashed the restroom. The crowd surrounded Diana, and Silverio gave her a final warning after he destroyed Mr. Kerrigan's classroom and attacked the teacher himself. Silverio decided to remove the witness and set the room on fire, leaving Kerrigan lying on the floor unconscious. Shay and Donovan saw the smoke and ran to see if the teacher was okay and helped him out of the classroom that was on fire. Donovan returned to rescue Birnbaum, but the thick smoke made it impossible to get back out. In the hallway, the collapsed ceiling finally condemned the boy. Stevens ran into the school just as a firefighter was pulling out the breathless body of his student. A reporter pitches the news of the tragedy as the result of a confrontation between a new teacher and a local gang. Like, was the Capoeira training program worth the life of a 17-year-old high school student? The principal immediately fired Stevens and ordered him not to show up here again. Shay saw the teacher and told him that gangsters were looking for him everywhere. He needed to be careful tonight. Orlando comes to the gym in secret from his brother. He asks Stevens to get out of town and forget about the gang. But he has already found out where Silverio's garage is and is going to visit him. The guy does not want his mentor to go to the other world after Donovan because he alone cannot cope with Silverio's army. At night, Stevens sneaks into the garage of an authority figure and gives the car mechanics a beating. The men cornered him, but the iron stick in his hands turned into a fighting pole, so soon only one big man was left on his feet. And not for long. But then the impenetrable giant with the welding machine came out, but it was a mistake for him to get under the car. Stevens immediately put the humble down. The last thing the battered warrior did was blow up a car full of wads of money. Silverio's got his gang looking for his attacker. They've got cars canvassing the neighborhood. 3 of the men Stevens attacked jumped from a tree, a couple more he knocked out among the sheets. After the Nostigmas, bandits with cleavers and bats attacked, and the Green Berets scattered them. But when they came to his aid, he was surrounded by a whole crowd and Stevens had no chance to fight them off. He was beaten, but not killed, because Silverio ordered the teacher to keep him alive. The gang was blocked by school capoeiristas, who were called to help by Orlando. He also got in line with them. The boys are going to fight off their teacher, but the massacre was not allowed by Silverio. Instead, he decided to personally punish his younger brother. He was stopped by Stevens and challenged to a second one-on-one fight. The fighters drew Pachisaku, but Stevens was soon unarmed. He snapped Silverius' arm and disarmed him. The big man took Stevens down, but started showing off too soon and also ended up on the sand. Patlety was about to strangle his opponent, but the students decided to support the teacher with a song and belted out a Brazilian folk song, which gave Stevens strength and he immediately defeated the villain, while the students kicked the bandits who were pulling guns. Having finished the job with a crowning blow, Stevens found himself in the arms of the guys. The police arrived at the scene of the fight. Everyone fled except the schoolboys and Silverio, who remained lying on the sand. Orlando immediately gave up his brother to the police and said that it was he who set fire to the class and thus killed Donovan. He is ready to repeat this in court. Soon the school held a graduation party and not-so-problematic guys arranged a surprise for Stevens. They invited professional capoeiristas to the stage and even brought his friend from Brazil.